Welcome, you guys. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited that we are having Maggie Fisher on today. Hello, Maggie. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for coming. I'm like so excited to chat with you. You're actually the first, I'm pretty sure. I think you're the only lawyer we've ever had on the podcast.
I'm the only cool lawyer that there is.
So true. Um, I love so I always say that if I wasn't a creative, I think I would have been a lawyer. My mom always told me growing up I should be a lawyer because I'm like so argumentative. So I like love getting to talk to lawyers because I just find it so fascinating. So for those that don't know you yet though, can you go ahead and give us an introduction on yourself, your business, all of the good stuff?
Well, I will say lawyering is a very creative craft, you would be good at it. But I'm Maggie. Thank you again for having me. I am a lawyer. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a photographer. Kind of happened like very simultaneously. I picked up a camera as like we all do just on a whim in college and was photographing friends, and I live in a small surf town in New Jersey. So I started working with professional surfers, doing portraits, shooting branding. I did like a couple brand shoots for like wetsuit companies and Billabong and those kind of things. And it just quickly snowballed. um, while I was in college, I started traveling with professional surfers and shooting all over the world with like the top women on tour, which was wild. And then all these people at home wanted me to shoot their weddings. Meanwhile, I was in law school. I finished college. I took a gap year. This is like such a wild journey and wild ride that I'm taking
Yeah, I'm
you.
like, whoa, I love it.
I actually worked in for the United Nations Development Program in Equatorial Guinea, West Africa, in between college and law school, where photography is illegal. Did some photo projects while I was there, kind of under the radar, probably banned from going back. And then went into law school, and I was photographing like 30 weddings a year throughout law school, and I always was kind of like, what am I doing? How am I gonna like combine these crafts? I was like living like two lives, I felt like I was like on this like lawyer journey and career path and track. And then I was just like doing the whole photography thing as well. Um, and it was good because it made me super efficient, but eventually I had to choose, as we all do in life at some point. I gave up the typical full-time career path as an attorney. And then the artist lawyer was born. It was just like my brainchild and merger of my two crafts. And it's amazing because I get to work with artists and creatives. I do a lot of trademarks, copyright, contracts, a lot of like business consulting, helping people with like sticky situations when clients are disputing payments or asking for refunds or like threatening. We all have those clients that like, I'm a
Yep.
lawyer, my daddy's a lawyer. Well,
Daddy's always a lawyer. I'm
I'm a
convinced.
mommy lawyer.
Much scarier, so much more intimidating. That's the real threat is a mommy
Yeah.
lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Wow. You dipped your toes into like literally everything,
Yeah.
including illegal photography projects. Like I'm just like you truly did it all.
Yeah.
Oh
Live
my
my life.
gosh. Also, I'm like, just can we just say a quick kudos for the fact that you were in law school and photographing 30 weddings a year? Like that's the crazy how did you survive that? What was that life like?
I worked really hard. I feel like I was always a hustler, and I've had a very supportive partner over the years who I feel like always just had my back and like whatever it was that I was doing. Um, but yeah, it was a lot. And I think it led me to the success that we have now because I was forced to be efficient. I'm like also very big into like workflows, systems, automations. Like we have like a well-oiled, very like, I don't know, very, very automated machine. It doesn't feel
Mhm.
automated to our clients, but it's like we just have processes in place for everything. And I quickly learned to outsource. So I hired a team, and I started growing a team my first year of law school because I was like, I need associates on backup, I need a studio manager, I need editors. And that was kind of like before, this was like 8 years ago now, or nine.
Mm.
So it was like before that it was like the thing to do, like outsource and automations and everything. yeah. And so I think that was the only way that I got through. And I've just kind of leaned into that with I now have 4 businesses. And so everything is kind of very like automated, streamlined, organized, team members under every brand.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do it.
You would have to. Yeah. I'm like, you literally, there's not enough time in the day to run all of
Yeah.
those businesses.
Yeah. To scale, you like have to have a team,
Yep.
as you
Yes.
know.
Okay, so many questions, so many ways to branch off. I'm like, my brain.
I
Okay,
think all
no,
the
yeah, I'm like,
time.
I have so many ways I want to go. But number one, I would love to know what going to law school while being a wedding photographer, like what that was like in terms of like each of those growing at the same time and the way they
Yeah.
intertwined. Because I'm just like thinking back to when I first started photography and like my first contract was very different than, my contract now, or like we just had my agency's contract written up and it's like the longest contract I've ever seen in my entire life. Like,
As it should.
yeah, as it should be. And like the more you go on, the more your contract grows. So like what was your I just want to hear about like what your photography business was like when you first started law school and like how it changed as you kept going and like just kind of the way that those intertwined with each other. I'm sure that was like very complex.
Yeah, it was. And I feel like I was so misunderstood, like not understood by like lawyers and people in law school and my professors. I grew up in the legal world. My mom was a judge growing up. And so I always had like lawyers and politicians around me. And I would always ask like my mom's friends, like, can you look at my photography contract? Did I do this right? Because obviously I wrote my own while I was in law
Mhm.
school. And people are always like, why do you need this? Or like, there's so much in here. You're just a photographer. But as you know, and like my philosophy is the more you have in there, it's not necessarily like you have this 12-page long contract and it's all like, striking the hammer down and like chaining someone to, like you own them forever. It's really like my approach is like you're putting everything out there on the table, like your processes, your expectations, and it's beneficial for the client and beneficial for like you as an individual to all come to terms with these things. So I really explored that in law school. And yeah, it was definitely like an interesting balance doing both. Like everyone was partying on the weekends, and I was like, well, I have another wedding.
Mhm.
But it was really interesting to like try to, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of where I realized that like artists and creatives are so not only like misunderstood, but like misrepresented because people don't really understand what we need as creatives in our contracts.
So what would you say? I'm like to get into it. What would you say are like some of the biggest gaps, both like maybe when you started, but even now, like what are kind of the bigger gaps that people have often in their contracts, or like when it comes to starting to have legal protection and representation
Yeah.
in their business?
I mean, oftentimes I see like the basics left out. So, I mean, I see people all the time that I just had a client recently who is like an amazing vendor in the industry, like top of the top, does not even have a service agreement in place. And I'm like, how, why, what? You have to have a contract. The legal things that you don't think are important, oftentimes really are. So like the things at the bottom that talk about like venue and jurisdiction. So like that's where a legal matter would take place if something did come up. I see like those things left out a lot. But I mean, I more so mean like what, when I was talking about that a second ago, like the nitty gritty of what it is that we do and like what the client expects. So for me as a photographer, little things like putting in that like we photograph engagement sessions on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So when a client
Mhm.
is reading their contract before signing, they can see that in there. It is not a secret. They've signed this document. So when they go and request a Saturday and we are fully booked on Saturdays for weddings, it's like it's just there's no awkwardness. There's everyone's kind of on the same page because they've had a chance to review it. And we've had like this is just a very very small example, but we've had clients even bring that up in the past and say like I saw in the contract you only photograph engagement sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Can you make an exception because of our work schedule? Yes, we'll like figure that out.
Mhm.
But it's just a way. that's something that like I feel like a traditional attorney is not going to think to put into your contract necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
just based off of like, unless you brought it to their attention. Um, and it just helps make like the client relationship so much better.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the things that people like they think of this contract as this like negative connotation. Like you mentioned, like this is so nitty-gritty, like I'm locking you in forever. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, like this is actually such a positive thing that can help your clients also feel so much more secure in their agreement with you and their expectations. Um, what are like I think I'm like one, laying out the days is so helpful. One of my favorite things in my contract is I'm a horrible texter, like
Yeah.
god awful. I have like 400 unread texts. Like I can't even text my
Yeah.
personal people back. There's no way a client is like going to be able to
Yeah.
contact me there. And so a couple years ago, I think, I can't remember exactly when, but like we had it installed in my contract that like you can only text me in case of emergency. And I'm like literally not liable for any information that you send to me in that format. It has to go through email and they have to initial buy it. And it was like life changing to like just have that be an expectation set. Um, do you have like common client expectations that people like, let's say they have rules in place within their business, but you often see it left out of their contract? Like, I think dates are a great one. Do you have like anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the texting, that's a perfect example. And like having them initial by it is a game changer. I literally was talking to a client of mine, a legal client of mine earlier this morning who has that in her contract, and her clients still, of course, text her. So I think too, it's a matter of like, are you abiding by the boundaries in your contract? You know, are you
Mm,
responding to those? Like, are you keeping those expectations alive that you've iterated in your contract? Because I think like a lot of people, I don't know, maybe they have them that in their contract, maybe they don't, but that's definitely a really good example of something that you can like let that boundary stand in there, and initialing by it is just going to really make it, that point drive home.
mhm. No, truly. I'm like, we love an initial right by the clause that you need to be like very recognized. Love that. Okay, so like when people are starting to like legally protect their business and they're like starting to look into that, what are like do you have like a top 5 things, top 3 things that you encourage people to keep in mind when they're starting to like this journey, or maybe it's even like improving their contract? Because like I said, like I know my contract has updated and like
Yeah.
shifted throughout the years. Like, what are some of the things that you recommend people really keep an eye out for?
Yeah. Well, always the legal basics. Like I always like to start with that. You know, you want to have a separate legal entity for a reason, to separate your personal assets from your business, to make taxes easier, get that separate business bank account, get insurance. It's not that expensive, and just like do all the professional things because it is worth it in the long run. And then when it comes to your contract, like I feel like we brought this up a few times now, that it's this evolving document over time. So you might get something, have something in place, or like say you even start with like something very basic. I always tell my clients, like after say we've done like a full blown custom contract, keep a note in your phone or like a Google Doc, whatever it is, and write down every like, just call it like nightmare situations, or like, I don't know, thoughts that keep me up at night, whatever you call it. And just make a note of all the things like that make you uneasy. Like say something, even if it doesn't all the way happen, like say something like you're like, oh, what if this client did this? And how would that play out in my contract? Like, am I actually protected? Make a bulleted list of that. Maybe it like adds up really quick and you contact your attorney in like a month. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's every year, but you can revisit your contract every year and keep that like live running document of like things that almost happen, or maybe do happen. Maybe it works out and it's fine, but these are all like real situations that are specific to your craft that a traditional attorney might not understand, and that even like somebody in the same industry might just have a different process than you. And so it's not baked into your contract. So you can just keep a running doc of it and then bring it to an attorney and say, like, what would happen under the terms of my agreement? Is this situation protected? How would this legally play out? do I need to add language in here? And that's something that you can do that's not like, you don't have to worry about like messing your contract up. Cause I think a lot of people go in and then there can be like conflicting terms or like conflicting language if you try to edit it yourself. So you can kind of just keep that document and then bring it to someone and say like, hey, let's make
I
sure all
mean,
this is covered.
we need to check that. No, that makes sense. I think it's like a really good thing to keep in mind that this is like a living, breathing document of sorts because, yeah, I mean, it's like eventually you're gonna find yourself in a situation that you didn't think was possible, and it's great to I remember I didn't have a defamation clause in my contract when I first started. I didn't even think about it. Like, that was something I literally didn't even think about.
Yeah.
And then, like, it was in one of my, like, first years full time. I had a client commit miscommunication, and she just, like, took to Facebook and just started saying things, like, random things, made up things, just was, like, dragging my name through the mud. And I just remember after I was done like crying in bed for days, I just remember being like, "Oh my God, like I need to have something in my contract about this that they can't just like go say random things and like drag my name through the mud." So I feel like it's always good to have something where you're like, "Hey, something like this has happened, could have happened. What can we do with that?"
Yep. Yeah.
I
Keep a
think
note
that's
of those things. Don't just like throw them under the bed.
mm-mm, no, I'm like they also like I'm like if they happen once, they can in fact happen again.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like creatives sometimes like skip doing contracts for things. Like they'll be like, I need a contract for this service, but like maybe not a model call or like maybe not, helping someone with something. I had a friend recently that performed a service for a friend, like 9 years ago, and they found like a glitch in a contact form like years later and like now are taking legal action because like there was a glitch in the form. Like it was so crazy and she was like, I didn't think about sending out a contract because it was my friend. Like I would have never even thought about that. Yeah. Well, probably not 9. That's probably me exaggerating off the top of my head. It was like within a couple years. It was like a long too long in my opinion, but like recent enough that they took action. But what are like some of the mistakes that creatives make in optimism that you see a lot of the time? Like they're hopeful things are going to be fine. And so out of optimism, they just like don't legally protect themselves.
Well, I feel like that was just a great example. It's like friends or like one-off situations. Like you need a random second shooter or like you're hiring a random person to do a thing. Just put the contract in place. It's just for everyone's benefit. And like we were just saying, it's not necessarily scary legalese. It's just everyone is agreeing to, I always like to say it's like a guide to the relationship or like a manual to
Mm,
how your business operates or like what your expectations are. Even like I have a lot of friends who are vendors and will hire friends to like come and help them perform their service like on a wedding day.
mm,
And they don't have like a contract with them. And then do they could come back and like dispute payment? Do they have permission to use the work in their portfolio to claim that they did, X, Y, and Z? You just like want all that to be clear because like you don't know if someone's going to go and start their own business the next day, the next month, the next year, and then like start like using images. Say you had like help as a florist and
mm.
whatever it might be, or like you just said, design. Um, it's just better to have that contract in place. So
Yeah.
uh,
Can I ask you like to give us things that you suggest like certain types of creatives have in their contract? Is that like a question I can ask? Like, could you tell us like 5 things that like wedding photographers should make sure they have covered?
Yeah. So some of the things that I find are like missing travel. I feel like a lot of people don't always have like travel in their contracts, how they're going to charge travel. If they are going to have like a travel stipend, travel warranty. So like what happens if a flight gets canceled? Like say like you're a wedding photographer, you're going to a destination wedding, your flight gets canceled, you lose that money on the flight. You need to rebook another flight in order to get there in time. Who's responsible for that? Because you didn't cancel the flight because of bad weather. You didn't choose to get married at a destination. You didn't like choose how many nights. Maybe they said, oh, we want to only pay for like 3 nights at the hotel. And you're like, well, I really would recommend having me come 2 or 3 days early. So that in case of flight issues, there's all these things, like all these things that you need to think about. So like travel warranty, travel fees, like who's responsible for what. Um, Style, artistic style. So like this goes for like all types of creatives, whether you're a photographer, a planner, a designer, whatever it might be. I always like to like make sure there's an acknowledgement that the client has done their diligence and like is choosing this creative for a reason. Like there's a million designers, photographers, planners, florists, like whatever it might be out there. You're choosing this person because of their portfolio and like you are trusting in their artistic discretion.
Mm.
And giving them like that discretion. Like I'm mind blown sometimes when people hire us and come back and they're like, can you edit in this way? And I'm like, that is not our vibe. Like you have seen our Instagram, like our Instagram is endless, like our portfolio is endless. Um, so that's always nice having there because you can just refer back to it. Let's see what else. I mean, there's
I'm
so
like, I
many.
can keep tossing. I'm like, what about like I'm trying to think of our audience and like what the demographic is. It's always wedding photographers. I would say another one is like business coaches, which I'm sure you've seen so much of as the industry
So
has like
much.
exploded. What are some of the like common missing things that you see in their legal protections?
Yeah. With business coaches, like especially if you're doing any kind of like notes or like deliverables, like sometimes they'll do like a
Mm.
strategy or whatever, how long you're going to keep a record of those things. So, like, what if somebody comes back a year later and they're like, hey, can I actually like, we had a shared Google Drive and like the Google Drive is now taken down. How long are you like keeping an archive of those documents? They didn't realize they had to, like, whose responsibility is it to keep those
Mm.
documents? So that's something I commonly see with like the education, like business coach sector. And yeah, I feel like boundaries, the big thing I'm seeing right now is chargebacks and like what happens in the case of it. I have like 4 or 5 clients right now that their clients have issued a chargeback for services rendered. And I see it so often, and then there's language missing in like either the credit card authorization or in the legal document, or there is no legal document or no language as to chargebacks. And all these, not only are you out the money because the bank takes that money out of your account when a client can just say this is a duplicate charge, this was fraud, or the service or product was never delivered. They can just claim that, and then you submit proof to the bank that you actually did deliver the service and it was authorized or whatever it might be, and like
Mm.
they still like pursue that. So not only is the money out of your bank, you're now spending your energy, time, and like your team's energy and time and your resources getting this money back. So like, are there late fees? Also, like the bank, sometimes I know, like I just saw $150 fee get tacked on to the dispute for the creative to continue pursuing the chargeback because it's costing the bank money. So they're like, if
Oh
you want
my
to keep
gosh.
like $10,000 fee that was charged back, it's going to cost you money. So then, are you able to send them to collections? Are they responsible for the added fees with chargebacks? Like there's so many things that I could go into. But
Yeah, I'm like the way my chest just tightens. I'm like it really is crazy how many things like you can see go wrong in these situations.
yeah.
What do you see oftentimes with like graphic designers or brand agencies? I feel like that's like a big third of our demographic is like designers, people handling things more on the aesthetic end. Like what are things that you feel like you can recommend that they usually like need to make sure that they have in there? That
Yeah.
was such a poorly phrased question, but
Similarly to chargebacks, especially with like if you're a graphic designer and you offer like templates or products, I feel like a lot of people offer payment plans. And I'm seeing that as well, where people will pay like one of 6 payments. Or
Mhm.
like I'm seeing that a lot with like online courses too. Um, so it's super important if like you have an online product as a graphic designer or like anyone that you have terms and conditions in place to support you in the case of a bank dispute, and that you are like required to like click wrap and check those terms and conditions. And like if you have the potential to have a software that when they get their receipt it says you've agreed to these terms and conditions and has those attached, so that you just have all of that documentation in place. That way if they like cancel their credit card or do a chargeback, you have that. Same thing with graphic designers with like the artistic discretion, rounds of revisions, how what amounts to a revision change, what amounts to like going back to the drawing board and like a full change of scope, a kill fee if like you can't come to an agreement, a unresponsiveness fee if somebody like ghosts you for a month or two and now you like allotted this space in your calendar and then now they're coming back and you've like booked other clients and you are struggling to fit them in. So yeah, I see all those things
So much.
so much.
So no, I'm like, but those are great jumping off points for like just easy gaps to have in your portfolio because like you said it's just like it can almost just keep getting deeper like there
Yeah,
it keeps branching off, so those are great jumping off points I think for
yeah,
anyone listening. Do
like
you
a
have
skill
like yeah,
transfer.
yeah, I'm like, do you have a recommendation for I think something like I'll use our business, for example. Um, I've like I know I've struggled when something has gone weird with a contractor or a client, or like you said, we had someone, I literally have no idea how they did it. I need to like contact Kajabi to like figure out how they did this. But they multiple times uploaded what I'm assuming must have been a fraudulent card, but somehow got approved, but like and got the courses, but never paid anything. Like a dime never got charged somehow. Like it just said the card failed, but for some reason it still let them slide through. And we found it the other day. We found that they had done it with like probably like $3,000 to $4,000 worth of courses, which was crazy. Like they had just gotten them for free and they had watched the whole thing. Like I was so mad. But then you play this game of like what's worth pursuing? Like when is it worth it to start looking into legal action? And I know that's not a one size fits all, but do you have like a recommendation for people to gauge on like when it's maybe worth looking into, like when you should
Yeah,
maybe start considering like protect, like, defending yourself essentially? Because I know at least on our end too, it's been a game of like, do we want to deal with that? Like, is that worth our time? Like, what does this look like?
yeah, totally. I feel like I see that a lot with creatives, and I feel like there's a lot of bigger businesses like in the creative sphere, like you, for example, where it's like maybe like, I have one client who's like a massive, massive like web graphic designer and yeah, it's like the same game of like at what point do you pay to pursue this when you're already out the money? I think, if you can form a relationship with an attorney and have someone that like you almost want to like think of like a creative attorney as like being a part of your team.
Mm,
And I have people that I'm, at a certain point in your business, they're just like have an open invoice and they can just send me things like, hey, can you send an email to this client that hasn't paid? Because it looks scarier when it's coming from an attorney. And maybe it
mhm,
takes 15 to 20 minutes. And that's like, I charge 450 an hour. So maybe that's
mhm,
like $100, but it's like you're just kind of again outsourcing. Hopefully, like 9 out of 10 times is going to get more resolved if like an attorney is taking it on. And you're getting that like scary like legal notice of you're in breach of these terms and conditions, in
mhm,
relation to your example, and you're liable per the terms and conditions for this payment. Here's the invoice. Late fees will tack on. We will tack on attorney's fees if it's not resolved by this date. And I think it's good to have like a system in place because okay, you let one person slip through, then you let another person slip through, then all of a sudden it's like $20,000 in like
yeah.
things that have been charged, and it's also like they're telling their friends, oh, I just did it this way, and now like
Mm,
I don't
mhm.
know.
Yeah,
Or
that makes sense. No, it's almost like a reputation thing at that point.
yeah, I think that it's really important to like protect your assets, protect your creative work. And I also like if I were you personally, I would be so pissed at Kajabi that they let that slide through. And I would be
Yeah.
hitting up their customer support so hard because I know Kajabi is so expensive and I would be asking for a credit on my account.
It's me about to text my assistant. Doo, doo,
Yeah.
doo, doo. I'm
Oh,
like, get on there. No,
and
that's
that's
like
why
so
them so much money to
mm,
be the card processor and like the support. So that's something I always come back to too is like with chargebacks and everything, like we pay so much money as creatives to Stripe. Like when you look at the percentage and you look at the end of the year, like tens of thousands.
Every
Like,
time I look at it, I'm like, "Ooh."
it's sickening. I think we had like 40, 50, $60,000 that Stripe made off of us last year. Hit them up. If you get a chargeback, like they should be giving you support on
Yeah.
like how, because they see it all the time, and it's like through
Mhm.
them. I don't know. I would
No,
hit
I'm
up.
like, I will be I will be doing that now. Okay, so I know when I enter these, I'm like that person where I get an idea or I hear about something and I'm like, I need to figure this all out at once. Like I need to sort everything right now. Like, how do I finish everything at the moment? So for those listening who are like, oh no, there's obviously like one, maybe I don't have a contract. Two, oh no, what if my contract is like borderline shit? What advice do you have to people on like just slowly starting to chip away at their own protection in a way that doesn't feel like scary, jarring, or rushed?
Yeah, make a list. I always feel better when I have like a to-do list. I have a lot of free resources on our site on the Artist Lawyer. So I have like a checklist of like the 10 legal things you need in your business, whether it's like, I think it's like LLC, insurance, separate bank account, contract, service agreements, and like employee and independent contractor agreements. Um, I also think it's good to start with a template. And I always tell people too, if you go to an attorney, it's going to be thousands of dollars like for a custom template. And I do feel like traditional attorneys, like they're going to have like the standard legalese in place, but what creatives more so need and like what I specialize in is that like very niche, very specific, like detail oriented language about what your craft and like what it is that you're doing. So I feel like people always are like, well, should I work with someone locally? Get a template that's highly specialized in what it is that you do. And if you want to have it reviewed by somebody in your area or like an attorney, have them review this document that's going to be very special. Like include that language
Mhm.
that like a regular attorney is not going to know to put in there. And I think it's a really good jumping off point too for, if you are more in those beginning stages. I have a lot of people who read through our contracts and they're like, I didn't even think about putting this process in place.
Yeah, I'm like, no, I feel like it's important to just like start with the basics. And I think like in all aspects of being a creative business owner, like it's so easy to get freaked out by how much you have to do, but in reality, like there's no end to the actual to-do list that we have as creative business owners. Like there's always going to be something else to do. And that applies to everything. Like there's always going to be probably another protection that you could have in place, but like there's no use in panicking of the like
Yeah.
endlessness of it all. Just like start chipping away at it.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, I feel like as creatives, the one thing that's so hard is wearing all the hats and like being
Mhm.
all the things. And you don't have to do that. Like, I don't know. I think like, and I'm sure you talk about this as well, but
Mhm.
like, you can focus on your craft and the thing that you're good at and like outsource and like delegate the things that like are not your expertise. Like you don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to be an accountant. Get a bookkeeper if you don't like doing your books.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, and like line up with someone like that can take care of that for you. I don't know. Just
100%. I
yeah.
love that. No, this was all so helpful. I'm like, I'm gonna have to send you some little emails soon. But thank you so much for coming on and like sharing all of your wisdom and for just being this badass photographer that also went to law school slash lawyer that's also a photographer both ways. I'm like, that's so mind blowing to me. Obviously we'll link everything for everyone in the show notes, including freebies that you just mentioned. But really quickly, could you let everyone know where they can find you on the internet?
Yes, thank you. So my personal Instagram is Maggie Fisher, MAGIFISHER, and the artist lawyer is where everything's at. So I think our handle actually doesn't have the S in it, even though I trademarked the artist lawyer. I couldn't get
You
see
thought you could get it. Dang it.
at all. But yeah, the artist lawyer. So find me.
Amazing. Okay, perfect. We will link that for you guys in the show notes. And we also have a discount code for you, which is very exciting. That will be linked for you there. So thank you so much, Maggie, for coming on. And thank you guys for listening.